The permanent exhibit at the Courtauld Gallery in London's Somerset House is the collection of Samuel Courtauld, the textile magnate whose taste focused on the Impressionist painters and their contemporaries. Oscar Reinhart, a Swiss tycoon, had a similar aesthetic, and now his art hoard is also on display at the Courtauld. Here is an unusual opportunity for a double feast of painters such as Renoir, Cézanne, Manet and Van Gogh. Barney, hello.
Hello, very nice to see you.
Great to see you, and I'm here for my double helping of Impressionists.
Fantastic, we're very happy to have you here.
So, we have this collection from Oscar Reinhart, a Swiss tycoon. How is it that it's come to the Courtauld now? How is it available?
Well, it's an amazing collection, but it hasn't actually left Switzerland in about 100 years because Oscar Reinhart put the collection together in the first half of the 20th century, opened it as a public museum in 1970, which it's been ever since, but it's not been able to lend before. And they have changed that rule now, and we were very fortunate in being able to partner with them to bring these amazing highlights to London to complement our own collection here in Somerset House at the Courtauld.
The tastes of Courtauld and Reinhart seem, at least on the face of it, to be remarkably similar. Is this just because they were men of that epoch?
I think they were rather visionary men of that epoch and were both pioneering collectors, Courtauld in London and Reinhart in Switzerland, and they were collecting at exactly the same time, largely in the 1920s and 30s. And indeed, when we were doing the research for this show with our colleagues at the Reinhart collection, we found in their archive a diary entry from Reinhart talking about a marvellous day he'd spent with Samuel Courtauld in London looking at his collection, so they were very aware of each other.
Was it in those days quite edgy to be collecting Van Gogh?
Others had done it earlier in other countries. I mean, the Americans were way ahead, the Russians were ahead, and also in France. But in the UK particularly, Van Gogh was still viewed in the 1920s with real suspicion, as was Cézanne and Gogh and others. So Courtauld really changed public taste by putting together his collection, and Reinhart did something very similar in Winterthur in Switzerland.
And one of the lovely things about having the two collections here at the Courtauld now is the echoes between the two. Now, for example, here we have two Van Goghs which show a hospital. He was in this hospital following his nervous breakdown. One shows the courtyard and one shows the interior.
This pair of paintings by Van Gogh are incredibly rare because they're the only two pictures that Van Gogh made of the hospital at Arles, which, as you say, is where he was treated after his mental breakdown and severing of his ear. We at the Courtauld are fortunate enough to have the major self-portrait with bandaged ear that he made at exactly the same time. So it's a beautiful kind of coming full circle in a sense. And amazing that these extraordinary works of art were the product of such trauma. Actually, it was Van Gogh's way back into himself as a man and as an artist was to paint. And these pictures speak of that, I think.
What mood do you pick up from that interior of the hospital?
There's something obviously melancholic about these men around the stove with its extraordinary stove pipe snaking up through the composition, but also the nuns there tending to the sick and the crucifix at the end of the corridor, at the end of the ward, offering this sense of salvation, give this mood of optimism as well, I think.
It does feel like the men are being looked after.
Exactly, and Van Gogh was very lucky to be in such good hands there in the hospital and under actually a doctor who was able to treat him very well for this very severe injury, so they saved his life undoubtedly.
Let's talk about another echo between the two collections, Manet's. The iconic painting from the permanent collection at the Courtauld, as far as I'm concerned anyway, is a Manet. It's, I think, of the Folie Bergère. And this one from the Reinhart collection, it could almost be a pair.
It's extraordinary. So the two of the most famous paintings in our respective collections, the Courtauld and the Reinhart collection, are these amazing bar scenes by Manet, these slices of Parisian life at the end of the 19th century. This one just a few years earlier than our bar at the Folies Bergère, but has all of that energy of a sort of snapshot of life in Paris at that time.
And who are these people? What sort of people are they, do you think?
Well, they are probably people that he's posed in his studio and then created this scene around them, but they are supposed to be the everyday middle-class people of Parisian cafes and nightlife. And in fact, this picture used to be one much larger picture that Manet cut in half and finished as two separate compositions, this one and the Oscar Reinhart collection, and amazingly, our founder, Samuel Courtauld, bought the other half for the National Gallery in London, and it's one of the great highlights there down the road in Trafalgar Square.
Manet absolutely loved this browny grey colour. You see it again and again, don't you? He was very enamoured of it.
Grey and black, I think, are the colours that Manet paints best. He handles them like almost no other artist since Velázquez, maybe. He's a master of those tones. And it's particularly appropriate given the wonderful sort of top hats and fashions of the day demanding that colour.
And let's turn our minds to Picasso. Picasso, and even the inexpert can spot it's the blue period. It's very, very blue. Why was Picasso so blue?
Well, he spends 1901, when this painting was made, in Paris. It's his first significant stay in Paris. He's only 19 years old, and he makes his mark that year as being a really one to watch in terms of a modern artist on the rise. Paints initially in very bright colours, and then at the end of the year, haunted by the memory of the death of his friend, Casagemas, starts to paint in tones of blue, and this is one of the first of his very famous blue period pictures.
And an extraordinary thing is that although this is from the Reinhardt collection, the Courtauld has been doing work on it, is that right?
Yes, well, when we started this project with our colleagues at the Reinhardt collection, we looked carefully at this picture because we suspected there was something else lurking underneath the surface, and we all became more and more convinced and plotted that when it came to London, we would take it to our Department of Conservation and Technology and make an X-ray of it to see if that was true.
And?
Clear as day, there is a portrait lurking under this picture of a woman who sits in this area of the picture, and which Picasso must have painted out a few months beforehand when he decided to turn his attentions to this melancholic palettes of blues.
You don't have a Picasso in the Courtauld collection, so is this a point where the tastes of the two men diverge?
Funnily enough, Courtauld also really admired Picasso's work at this period, and I think he saw it as an extension of the work of Van Gogh and Gogh and others. And so he also bought a 1901 Picasso Blue Period picture, which he left to one of his family members, so it didn't come to us, but the tastes were very much aligned.
The Spanish artist, and as a postscript, shall we visit a rather older Spanish painter? Well, your exhibition is called From Goya to Impressionism. When I heard about Goya, I thought I'd find a Spanish king or queen, or perhaps a scene from the Napoleonic War. What do I get? Salmon steaks.
It is the most remarkable little picture. In fact, Reinhardt thought of Goya as being the first truly modern artist, so it begins his exploration of art, really. But salmon steaks aren't quite all they seem. It was actually painted during the Peninsular War, when France was pitted against Goya's native Spain and other countries. And Goya wasn't able to paint a more overtly political subject, so he chose seemingly innocuous salmon steaks, but actually in the context of that bloody conflict, these cut-up pieces of salmon oozing with blood take on a rather different connotation.
Well, I'm very glad you were here to interpret that. That is absolutely fascinating. Just finally, tell me, how do you feel about having been able to mount this exhibition, and particularly the juxtaposition of the two collections?
I think for a lot of visitors here to the Courtauld, it's been the first time they've seen the Reinhardt collection, and that's been wonderful to see people looking at works that they are absolutely enamoured of but haven't seen in the flesh before. And we hope, of course, people will then make the journey to Winterthur to see them in their home setting when the museum there reopens. But the juxtaposition and the fitting together of the two collections has been beyond beyond what we expected. I think it feels as if they are very much at home together here at the Courtauld.